What's good, everybody? I'm the G with a PhD, and you're tuned in to the Green Gorilla channel, the place where Black men can express themselves freely, straight up, no chaser. Now, I know it's a little late on a Tuesday night, but I decided to drop in real quick and do a little stream. It ain't gonna take too long. It might piss some people off, but it is what it is. You know, I'm always pissing people off. I want to give a shout out to Leroy Honeycutt. What's up, St. Louis? What's up, man? And Devateo. But before I get started, I also want to shout out my members. So I want to give a shout out to James Washington, Hostile Adept, Seven Coast Dojo, Ronan Martin, Shop Talk Live, WPR1, Roguish the Billmonger, I Care, The Nameless Protagonist, Force Windu, Lady Miss Thing Green, BGS Ivmore, and Marvin Battle. Shout out to all of y'all, okay? Now, and thank you so much for the donation. T-Fit Dad X. What's up, Damon? What's up, Dave Teo or Dave Tao? So look, I want to talk today about something because I think a lot of times we get distracted, and through our distractions, we start attacking random motherfuckers. We just start making random attacks on various members of our society. And we get so distracted, it's like you can't see the forest for the trees. But, if you can't see the forest for the trees, if you can't see the totality of what you're dealing with, then you'll be in a constant state of confusion. So I'm just going to show you, if I may, and if I might, what it is that I'm talking about here. And I'm going to share the screen, and I'm going to play this. I'm going to play this down. And I'm sure I'm letting the cat out of the bag. But look, you see, we lose sight of what the real problem is, the root of the problem. All signs point to that motherfucker right there. This white guy, the white man. We so busy talking about everybody else that we forget what the fucking real problem is. And I ain't saying all white men are fucked up on an individual or interpersonal level. That's not what I'm talking about. Because there's some cool white motherfuckers. But it's a whole bunch of dirty, rotten motherfucking white dudes, man. And systemically, they've set up structures designed to fuck us over as Black men. And even as Black women. But I won't go so far as to all of the intricacies of that just yet. But oftentimes, we don't have our eyes on the prize. We don't go to the root of the problem. So you can start fucking around, attacking the problem, and then not know what the real problem is anymore. But let me tell you something. See, a lot of times, we don't even know what these guys think. Yesterday, I did a show, or was it the day before yesterday? I can't even remember now. It's like a blur. But I did a show, and we talked about Thucydides and the Melian debate and what these people think about justice. What they think about justice. And it's quite different than what you would believe, because most people are inclined to think that justice should apply to everyone. But that's not how they think. That's not how these people think, man. And they haven't been thinking that way since ancient times. I'm talking about before the Common Era. I'm talking about BCE. Or BC if you want to have the Judeo-Christian orientation towards time. And I can't see what's going on in the chat at all, so because I'm in this presentation. All I got is one screen. So excuse me if I can't see you all right now. And I don't know how many people are here, but I think you need to hear this. Again, what's the root of the problem? That motherfucker right there. Now, when you start talking about justice and what's fair, what's right, how things should be, let me tell you what they think about justice. And I'm going to share a series of quotes from these people. This is an interlocutor in a dialogue from Plato called The Republic. And one of the interlocutors in The Republic basically says, justice is the advantage of the stronger. That's what justice is. Might makes right. That's what it is. That's how it is. Now, of course, Plato doesn't agree with this. But I mean, the man had to write an entire fucking book in order to try to find a way to get around the way average Athenian motherfuckers thought about it. Because I can guarantee you, the average Athenian citizen thought just like this, that justice is the advantage of the strong. Might makes right. It is what it is. Get down or lay down. That's what it is. So this man wrote an entire fucking book to try to find a way to get around or to make people in his society and in his culture understand that that's not what justice really is. But then his most serious challenge doesn't come from this guy, this Thrasymachus guy. It comes from an interlocutor by the name of Glaucon, which just so happens to be Plato's brother. That's his fucking brother. Okay? And this is what his brother has to say, Plato's brother has to say about justice. And it's a long quote. They say that to do injustice is, by nature, good. To suffer injustice, evil. But that the evil is greater than the good. And so when men have both done and suffered injustice and have had experience of both, not being able to avoid the one and obtain the other, they think that they had better agree among themselves to have neither. Hence, there arise laws and mutual covenants. So let me break that shit down. In other words, it's good to do what's unjust. But it's bad to suffer evil. And it's worse to suffer evil than it is to be able to do injustice. So when you experience both, you come to the conclusion that it's best to not do either injustice or to suffer it. So let's form an agreement amongst each other and let's stop fucking each other up. How about that? Let's call a truce. How about that? But this is not the most interesting part of it, because he then goes on to say, and look at this shit. It is a mean or a compromise between the best of all, which is to do injustice and not be punished. You see that shit? It is to do injustice and not be punished, and the worst of all, which is to suffer injustice without the power of retaliation. And justice, being at a middle point between the two, is tolerated not as a good, but as the lesser evil, and honored by reason of the inability of men to do injustice. For no man who is worthy to be called a man would ever submit to such an agreement if he were able to resist. He would be mad if he did. Such is the received account, Socrates, of the nature and origin of justice. So then, basically what he's saying is, if you can get some shit off, fuck justice. This is the origin of social contract theory. in 375 BC, man. That's the first instance in the Western world that you can point to and look at the social contract tradition. I don't know if you know much about the social contract tradition, but God damn it, this is it. The only reason you agree to not do another motherfucker harm is because they can harm you. But if you can get the shit off, you would be mad not to get it off if a motherfucker cannot retaliate. That's what it means. So the nature and origin of justice means to prevent mutual harm. But if you can harm a motherfucker and he can't harm you back, get it off. And the whole goddamn book, Plato's Republic, is an answer to that shit right there. This quote by his brother. It's a strong position. Like, damn. And imagine, you see how quick it was. This is a concise statement. This motherfucker got to go up and down around a whole bunch of mountains in order to try to disprove this. Because it appeals to people. It's direct. It's real. But then it don't stop there, because you can keep going through history of Western thought and to see what they think about justice. And other people and different natures. So in a Platonic dialogue called the Gorgias, this is what Plato says. And I'm taking it out of context, but still, this is what he says. Nature herself intimates that it is just for the better to have more than the worse, the more powerful than the weaker. And in many ways, she shows among men as well as among animals, and indeed among whole cities and races, that justice consists in the superior ruling over and having more than the inferior. Let me repeat it. Justice consists in the superior ruling over and having more than the inferior. But it doesn't stop there. When you want to start talking about what they think about inferior and superior, now I'm moving to Aristotle. Now, Aristotle was Plato's pupil. But he disagreed with Plato about a whole lot. But I don't want to get into that. But this is his student, and this is what he says. For that some should rule and others be ruled is a thing not only necessary, but expedient. From the hour of their birth, some are marked out for subjection, others for rule. By nature. That's what he means when you say by birth. Some are fit to be ruled. Some are meant to be subjected. But then the question becomes, well, what kind of people are meant to be subjected to rule? And yet, I went over it. I went over Thucydides and the Melian debate. I'm telling you what these people think, man. They've been thinking this shit since ancient times, bro. Or sis, if you're out there. Right. See, we talk about rights all the time. What's right or wrong? What's just, unjust? What's fair? What's not fair? This is what they think. Right. as the world goes, is only in question between equals in power, while the strong do what they can and the weak suffer what they must. And the Athenians told that to the Melians before they ended up killing every male citizen, and then they enslaved the women and the children. And this was to their own motherfucking people, their own fellow Greeks. I'm trying to give you the insight into the ethos, the philosophy, the thinking, the orientation to the world that these motherfuckers have. But it don't stop there, because if you move forward in time, let's move from the ancient times to modernity, the era of Enlightenment, where they become rational. And when they institute their plan of colonialization of the Americas, and they come into contact with Africans in a way that they hadn't done before. So what do they start saying about people of African descent? I'm apt to suspect the Negroes, and in general all other species of men, not just us, but he especially marks the Negroes off. Other men too, but especially us. I'm apt to suspect the Negroes, and in general all other species of men, to be naturally inferior to whites. There was never any civilized nation of any other complexion than white, nor even any individual eminent in action or speculation. Sound like they need to be ruled, don't it? Sound like they deserve to be placed in subjugation. Sounds like it's a situation in which they supposed to make them suffer what they must, because they gonna do what they can. That's what it sounds like to me. But it don't stop there, because we can go to Immanuel Kant. Now, I don't know if you know anything about Immanuel Kant, but he came up with the idea, the concept of duty theory. Deontology is what it's called, but it's basically or loosely translated into duty theory. And he came up with the concept of the categorical imperative, which was basically where you have to treat everyone as an end and never as a means to an end. You can't use people because you wouldn't want people to use you. It's like an elaborate outlining of the golden rule: do unto others as you would have them do unto you. But he refines it philosophically, this concept of treating people kindly and nicely and treating them as an end and not as a means. But even this motherfucker comes out his mouth describing a report of something seemingly intelligent having once been said by an African. Kant dismisses it on the grounds that the fellow was quite black from head to toe, a clear proof that what he said was stupid. Your quintessential moral and ethical theorist. Calling black people stupid. But it doesn't stop there, because you can go on to a German philosopher by the name of Hegel, who says, in Negro life, the characteristic point is that the consciousness has not yet attained to the realization of any substantial objective existence, as for example, God or law. in which the interest of man's volition is involved and in which he realizes his own being. This distinction between himself as an individual and the universality of his essential being, the African in the uniform, undeveloped oneness of his existence has not yet attained, so that the knowledge of an absolute being, an other, and a higher than his individual self is entirely wanting. The Negro, as observed, exhibits the natural man in his completely wild and untamed state. That's a whole bunch of fucking jargon to say, you niggas ain't shit, you're dumb, you're savage. You're no more than a damn sheep, an animal, a monkey. But it doesn't stop there, because he says, another characteristic fact in reference to Negroes is slavery. Among Negroes, parents sell their children, and conversely, children their parents, as either has the opportunity. The polygamy of the Negroes has frequently for its object the having of many children to be sold, every one of them into slavery. The king of Dahomey had 3,333 wives. Viewed in the light of such facts, we may conclude slavery to have been the occasion of the increase of human feeling among the Negroes. So in other words, slavery was good for us by them. Notwithstanding the fact that this motherfucker's leaving out the fact that the original slaves were Europeans. Like, Europeans didn't enslave one another. In fact, the word slave comes from the word Slavic, which is an ethnic identity group within the context of European history. So don't talk to me about, well, they're still selling their people off as slaves. So the fuck were you people? So were you. Let's not get it twisted. I didn't put in this Johnny Appleseed shit right here is not supposed to be there, but that's supposed to be Abraham Lincoln. And I'm sorry that it's not there, but it's supposed to be Abraham Lincoln. And this is what he said: the motherfucker that freed the slaves. I will say then that I am not, nor have ever been, in favor of bringing about in any way the social and political equality of the white and the black races. I am not, nor ever have been, in favor of making voters or jurors of Negroes, nor of qualifying them to hold office, nor to intermarry with white people. And I will say, in addition to this, that there is a physical difference between the white and black races, which I believe will forever forbid the two races living together on terms of social and political equality. Good old Abe, honest Abe. Honest motherfucking Abe. I want to give a shout out to again T-Fit Dad X, also to Truth 7360, and also give a shout out to Joe from DC. Appreciate that. Okay, but you want to know what they think. You want to know what the root of the fucking problem is. Like I said, what is the root of the problem? Sometimes we lose sight of what the root of the fucking problem is, and why we're in this jam to begin with. And so I'm gonna dig back in. I'm diving back into where I was, but I gotta dive back in. I'm gonna dive back in. You see, you got to understand the fucking hierarchy here. See, the boss is the white man, unapologetically territorial, and he rules wherever he can. And everybody else must do what they must. Now, you have some competition. You got Asians, Middle Easterners. Some could even say Africans as they rise. But he has his competition, and they have competition amongst themselves. But don't get it twisted. They believe that they're supposed to rule wherever they can. They believe that they're superior. They believe that they're more civilized. That's just what the fuck it is. I mean, that's what history demonstrates. They're coming out and telling you what they think. You got to watch what a motherfucker's doing as opposed to just listening to what they're saying. Don't listen to what they're spewing. Pay attention to what they're doing. That's what you need to do. Now, the second in command, of course, is this woman. The women of his race. They're second in command. It is what it is. I would argue that they are among the wealthiest people in the United States. Because when their husbands die, who gets the money if there are no children? Or if their children are already doing well? Who gets the fucking money? Because men don't outlive women. Women outlive men. Who's left with the estate? Who gets to dispense and disperse the money? Underneath her, and we can go on, there are different races of people in this country. I'm talking about what's going on here. But then you get underneath her, you get the black woman. And I say that she's both protected and thwarted by the first and the second in command because they are not a lethal threat. They're going to be kept in their place. They don't have the same ranking, but they're not a threat, so they can move around easier. We know that women weren't chained down on slave ships like men were. Maybe on some ships, but for the most part, feel free to roam around the cabin. We know that through David Walker's appeal, there's a story in which there's an accounting of a horde of Negroes being transported. All the men were locked up in chains and cuffs. None of the women were locked up. These Negroes broke loose, and oddly enough, they had a Negro driver with them. They ended up getting loose from their chains and killed all the men except for the brother who was a fucking slaver. They should have killed his ass, keeping it 100. But they spared his life. They didn't kill him. So then one of the women ended up fucking saving this guy, and then they end up catching the whole goddamn group. And that's when David Walker just goes ape shit. Like, what the fuck is wrong with this motherfucker? You don't know what team you playing on. But then I got another depth chart. And it might piss you off when you see it, but it is what it is. So look, what is the white woman's role in this society? Basically, she's the domesticator of wilderness and the terraformer of spaces, safe spaces. Because once the men conquer them, the women domesticate them to their liking. She's the facilitator of education. If you hadn't noticed, look at all the movies you see about education. She's been the primary educator from the inception of this motherfucking nation. Who do you think the school teachers are now? Go look at the demographic. Then you got little kids coming home wondering if they the good child or the bad child. She's the second in command. She's the educator. And then they say, well, we have no power. We need no power. Bullshit. And let me tell you how twisted this shit is, because if you know history, anybody that knows European history knows. It's just a motherfucking matter of fact. I just don't see how people don't get this. It's just a common fucking understanding about European history that before the Enlightenment, before the French Revolution, before the Protestant Reformation and all that shit, you had a divine right king system set up in Europe. That's the way the fucking society was arranged. You had the Catholic Church, and then you had these various kings in various nations, and the nobility were the rulers, and what they wanted was law. And then everybody else was a peasant, a bondsman, a vassal, a serf. This is the way their society was arranged. And you had women who were members of the fucking nobility. And do you mean to tell me that the women of the nobility didn't have as much power and influence and political impact than a fucking serf, a vassal, a peasant? This is the shit that just it befuddles my brain. The lack of history and understanding and interpretation that people have. And you see what? Let me tell you something. All these fucking statues you see in the South of Confederate soldiers, guess who put them motherfuckers up? It wasn't white men. It was white women venerating them motherfuckers, honoring them. And they lost. And they still were honored even when they fucking lost. Don't get it twisted. See, I know for a fact, man, I've been in academia for a minute. And I know for a fucking fact, most of these women that are feminists, they got husbands at home. They work as professors, not assistant professors, not associate professors. I'm talking about full fucking professors. Went through every fucking level of progress within the confines of the university system. They got husbands. And they teach feminist philosophy. What you think about that shit? So while sister girl don't need no man, their most ardent radicals got husbands. But that's tangential to my conversation, because at the end of the day, because she's not a threat, she can go up or down. She can be racially and socially hypergamous. She can freak the system and co-align her interests with that of the system and sneak through the cracks. And also, she still has the ability to be socially hypergamous with the men that she's involved with in the context of her relationship life. She can get resources from the simps, pleasure and excitement from the motherfucking thugs, and the incels she can humiliate and laugh at for entertainment. But at the end of the day, what is the motherfucking source of the problem? The boss man. Because he's the one that writes all the fucking laws. He's the one that holds all the judgeships. He's the legislator. He's the police. I mean, how many black presidents have you had? One? One. Look at the Congress and the Senate. Tell me how many minorities you got there. And if you do see any minorities, they're probably the same old motherfucking bunch. They've been there forever. And they ain't doing a goddamn thing for the average Negro. Now, are they? You seen any radical changes in your life lately? I have to hit you with some realism. Because we get sidetracked. We get to talking about everything but that motherfucker. The system is artificial. It's set up the way he and his second in command wants it. But then that begs a bigger question, because we already know the subordinate male target hypothesis demonstrates, if you buy into social dominance theory, and I buy into it because I think it pretty much measures up to what we know about history. Namely, that history is a series of contests between men over resources and honor. Resources and respect. Resources and status. Look at the history books. That's what you'll see. Various contestations amongst men for resources and status. And it's a thing that happens between men. I'm not saying the catalyst for it isn't women, because very often it is. But let's not be deceived. Let's not perpetuate fiction. Men fight one another for resources and status. And most societies are arranged in such a way that the in-group males openly, overtly target the out-group males for oppression and acts of violence. So you public enemy number one. It just is what the fuck it is, man. That's political realism. All that intersectionality shit, to me, is a bunch of bullshit. I'm just keeping it 100. Well, you know, there's so much that I go through. Like, look, let me just say this shit. Not trying to disrespect black women, especially if they know what the fuck is going on. But if you ain't taking the red pill, and I just use that as a metaphor, because to me, the red pill is nothing more than being able to fold back the curtain so you can see shit for how it really is, instead of playing all these niceties, these games, instead of dealing with the world of appearances. Let's just tell it how it is. Let's keep it 100 here, man. Oh, well, no one pays attention to me and I'm not seen. And man, fuck all that, man. Look, at one point, black women and black men were together and they had a political destiny because they were working cooperatively to attain a mutual objective. But at some point, they branched off and decided it was best for them to work on politics alone. We've been going through that for the past 60 years. Now, white women sit there and they say, well, we don't have as much as men have, and we don't have as many, opportunities and all that kind. Look, that shit might work for white women, but let's be honest, man. White women have always had privilege in this fucking country. Always. They've been able to own property, inherit property, receive property after the husband's death. Come on, man. Let's stop fucking lying. Stop playing games. And I ain't hating the fact. It's the facts. Oh, we didn't get the right to vote until, come on, man. Men didn't get the right to vote in this fucking country at its inception. White men didn't get the fucking right to vote. You had to be a property owning male. Oh, we're just so oppressed. They know that's some bullshit. They living their best life. Where you want to go? You want to go to the mall? When they go to the mall, they ain't got to worry about a bill getting paid. Now, I ain't saying all of them, the vast majority. So, knowing that, it don't matter if you a simp, a motherfucking thug, an incel, or a nigga doing the damn thing. You still are public enemy number fucking one. That's like, I remember the NWA song, what they call the song, A Nigga for Life, where at the end of the song, where it don't matter if you're rich, you're a rich nigga. If you're poor, you're a poor nigga. If you're educated, you're an educated nigga. But you never stop being a nigga. You still a subordinate male. You still are targeted. You still targeted. So then that begs the question, and this is a question that I have to ask you. How does individual material success, and most of us don't have it anyway, by the fucking way, but let's say, for example, you got it. How's that gonna save you? How does that save you from the subordinate male target hypothesis? How does it save you from being attacked, from being subjected to what they want, whenever they want, however they want? We done been through this shit before. Tulsa, Oklahoma. Throw a bomb in that bitch. Destroy it. Fuck it. Tear it out. How does it save you? I hate to be the bearer of bad news, but we got to be real. And let me go back. I got something else to share with you. Went over this before. I'm going to go over it again. You see this? Black men face high discrimination and depression even as their education and income rise. This is an article written by Tommy Curry and Shervin Asari. Let me make it a little larger. So the more successful you are doing the damn thing, oh, I'm balling, bruh. Now, this is a set of empirical studies. And what did the study say? In the National Survey of American Life study, Black boys from the wealthiest families were the most depressed. Study number 2. In a study that followed 1,200 Black and white people for 25 years, for Black men, the highest educational credentials were associated with an increase rather than a decrease in depressive symptoms. Study number 3. In a nationally representative sample of US adults, Black men with the highest income has the highest risk of depression, specifically major depressive disorder. We also found that interpersonal discrimination, or people discriminating one-on-one, was not a reason. Study number 4. Another study, 700 Black adolescents were followed for 2 decades in Flint, Michigan. Perceived racial discrimination was measured in 1999 and 2002. We found discrimination during adolescence was a predictor of depressive symptoms as individuals transitioned to young adulthood a decade later. But this was the case for Black males, not Black females. Study 5. In that same Flint study, we found that an increase of perceived neighborhood fear being, defined as being scared of crime and violence in the neighborhood was associated with an increase in depressive symptoms for Black males, but not Black females. Isn't that odd? Because every time I turn around, it's all about, oh, we're so scared, we're oppressed, we're dying. You're like, we're facing 3 pandemics. We're facing COVID, Black men, and whatever the fuck else. Racism. We got the COVID, racism, and Black men. That's what they say. Study number 6. Our final research was studying implicit bias and when people without their conscious knowledge hold stereotypes about others. Our study applied data of the implicit association test, which measures how our brain struggles to match Black faces with positive terms. Of nearly 450,000 individuals, we found that white men hold higher implicit bias against Black people than white women do. This is troubling because white men have the highest level of political power and make up the majority of the police, judges, lawyers, and people who make hiring and promotion decisions. White men were also most likely to be the ones who write the rules and the laws. Implicit bias is still bias, and it too could be a factor in Black men's depression. Man, fuck all that implicit bias bullshit. That's some bullshit. I'm telling you, even if you do got a problem with violence in the hood, in all likelihood, the motherfuckers who kicked it off and who keep it going are these motherfuckers. Just so you know. Who are these motherfuckers? That motherfucker right there. Because if you know anything about the ghetto, you know that the ghettos didn't just happen naturally. They were created. You had restrictive covenants, redlining, neighborhood associations, denial of FHA loans, denial of GI Bill loans. You got white flight. Disinvestment, disenfranchisement, outsourcing the jobs, the devaluation of the property. Those places were created. They were fabricated. All the while those were created, the suburbs were created also. Those were the areas where people did get the FHA loans and they did get the GI Bill. It is what it is. Now I'm describing shit right now. I'm just describing the predicament. But the one thing I know, anytime that, say, for example, a group of people are going to try to figure out how to take down an organization, you got to examine all the principal fucking players and the roles they play. That's what detectives do. That's what the FBI does. That's what the CIA does. It's what the military does. They figure out who the fucking principal players are, and then they try to peck away and turn and flip motherfuckers in order to gain more intel about what the fuck the boss is doing. Because you really want the boss. Or maybe you don't. Maybe you don't want the boss. I want to give a shout out to my man Goshen. Thank you for the donation, my brother. I appreciate it, man. Thank you, sir. Appreciate that. And I ain't mean to go in too hard, man. You know. What is Black Knight Food? I'm gonna give y'all, if anybody has any objection to what it is that I'm articulating or what I'm saying, then you can come in and invite and come in on this chat. You can come in and say what you gotta say. Speak now or forever hold your peace. If you have, because I'm seeing some guy, Black Knight Fool, is saying you're oversimplifying something much more complex because they consist of competing subgroups for power in their group. Look, bro, we already know that. I already mentioned that early on in the stream. They have internecine warfare amongst themselves. It still doesn't stop them from being in a quest or thirsting for fucking power. It doesn't stop them from thirsting for power and control. Let me say something, man. At the end of the day, Black Knight Fool, here's the reality of the situation. While they are in conflict with one another, they're still making sure that they're doing what? Because at the end of the day, while they're fighting with one another, guess what they're doing while they're fighting with one another? They're gaining control because they're fighting over power. They're not fighting to be treated justly or fairly. They're fighting for what? Let's go back to it so that you can understand it. They're unapologetically territorial, even with one another. They rule wherever they can, even with one another, even amongst one another. So while we're here, well, you're not doing this right. Don't do us that way. You're not treating us fairly, sir. They don't give a fuck about that. Because I'm telling you what they think. I done already told you what they think. You want me to go back to what they think? Justice is the advantage of the stronger. Sometimes you need to go back over it. They say that to do injustice is by nature good, but to suffer it evil. But that the evil is greater than the good. And so when men have both done and suffered injustice and have had experience of both, not being able to avoid the one and obtain the other, they think that they had better agree among themselves to have neither. See, they can come to agreement with each other because their relative power equals. They'll form a truce and develop justice amongst one another. Justice is not good in and of itself. There's nothing intrinsically valuable about it. They only follow it or practice it owing to the fact that it stops them from killing each other. However, just look at it. No man who is worthy to be called a man would ever submit to such an agreement if he were able to resist injustice. If he can do what he wants to, he gonna do it. Bottom line. Nature imitates that it is just for the better to have more than the worse, the more powerful than the weaker. Justice consists in the superior ruling over and having more than the inferior. Some should rule, others should be ruled. Right as the world goes is only in question between equals in power. The strong do what they can, the weak do what they have to. Now, it don't get no more simple than that. It don't get no more simple than that. Now, I've been calling for unity all along. But it just comes down to the short and the tall of it. So the question is, how do you respond to it? Because I can tell you right now, you ain't gonna talk your way into peace. You ain't gonna talk your way into peace with people that think like that. I had a priest call me, man. I talked this man. A Roman Catholic priest, bruh, came to learn the philosophy of race from me. And I gave him like 10 books to read. One of those books was a book called The Racial Contract by Charles Mills. See, right now in this space, I can get more technical and start using graduated terminology and jargon, but I'm not trying to lose you. I'm trying to keep it simple. So that anybody can understand it. This is not like very complex. Justice is the advantage of the stronger person. To them, who is ever strong, get to establish the rules of what justice actually are. And one of the things they do is divide and conquer. Why wouldn't I not divide and conquer? I'm supposed to divide and conquer. That's my goal. I'm unapologetically territorial. Now, I don't know if you actually know, but there's a man by the name of Edward Bernays. He's the father of propaganda. He came along and tried to clean up the face of dictators, bullies, and ignorant people all over the damn country. Look it up, Edward Bernays. So now you got Banana Republic dictators looking like philanthropists. But ask yourself, what's really going on, man? You think these people are just spreading democracy throughout the world out of the kindness of their hearts? They just want people to be able to govern themselves. Or are they out there taking shit because it's theirs to take? It's their job to divide and conquer. I'm not saying that, oh, it's our fault. I'm telling you what's real. I'm telling you what they think. This ain't got shit to do with me. They telling you they're giving you their own game. They done told you what they thought. From ancient to modernity, contemporarily, they sing in a different song. But come on, man. All you got to do is watch what they're doing. Watch what they're doing. You don't want to get into all of the major skirmishes that America's been in since when? After World War II? Korean War, Vietnam, Iraq, Afghanistan. All that shit was for what? And that's just the beginning of it. Those are the big ones. These people don't care about shit we doing, bro. They figure that we're wild, savage, untamed niggers. Now, I didn't create that. They telling you right there. Now, some of them know. Some of them understand. Some of them know. Some of them are aware. Some of them are actually, because they're not all the same. They're not all the same. I said even before, there's some white good people out here though. There are. Like I'd ride with John Brown any day. That motherfucker, he was about that life. But Basala Lamont, this is the thing, brother. They don't play fair. What's fair is the advantage of the stronger. There's no such thing as fairness. Fairness is what they do. That's the point. That is the point. The whole point is justice is the advantage of the stronger. When it comes to right, you only get justice when you got power equality. There's no power equality. There's no situation of justice that obtains. The only reason justice comes in is when two people can harm one another and they say, let's not fuck each other up, bro. But when you can dominate somebody, you're supposed to do it. And you would be a fool if you didn't do it. Because for some that should rule, some should rule others and others should be ruled. Is a thing not only necessary, but expedient. From the hour of their birth, some are marked out for subjection, others to rule. Now, I didn't make it up. I ain't come up with this. I'm just letting you know what they think. And I told you I was giving you a broad adumbration, an outline, a sketch. All the pieces on here, I ain't got time to put all these pieces together. I got other shit to do in my life. But I'm going to spend some time helping you, you know what I'm saying, get some sort of rough orientation to what's going on. And the genealogy of their thought from way back when up till now. Let me tell you this about that, what you just said here, and then I'm gonna let you chill for a minute. This is what they think. And this is what it is, man. There's a philosopher. In fact, this philosopher, go check, quote me on it. And if I'm wrong, I will do 25 push-ups on this motherfucking screen with my face showing it all. The person who gave rise to postmodern thought was Friedrich Nietzsche. And to him, he saw a disturbing trend in Western politics. He called it slave morality, where you got a group of people asking for fairness and saying things aren't right and we need more equality. To him, that was the beginning of the end of the strength of the West. People crying over, oh, we're not treated equally. To him, that's the beginning of the end of Western culture. Because you got slave morality and master morality. Slave morality seeks to bring about equality and fairness. Slave morality is about power and self-actualization. So Ubermensch, Uberman, Overman, they self-actualize and their morality is what's good for them. They make their own morality. Slave morality is imposed through doctrine predicated upon the weak being envious of what they can't get from the strong. But I don't even want to go down that rabbit hole. But in my view, I'm just going to be honest. A lot of what I see in race philosophy and in feminist philosophy, quite frankly, it is slave morality. It is. You didn't treat me right, sir. You ain't doing you, Poe. You ain't had to hit me like that. Why did you do that to me? That was so painful. But look, we withstood a whole lot. One could argue our main goal was to survive. We struggled through a lot. But then we got to decide what we're going to do. Because right now we got fissures and fractures and people who are losing sight of what the fuck these people really think and how they really move. And everybody's jockeying for position on the plantation. Fuck this plantation, man. Now I leave you all. I can't come up with the solutions all myself with this, about this. There are 40 million Negroes that live in the United States, man. 20 million males, somewhere around 21 million females, man. Who am I to even suggest what that large amount of group of people should do in relation to their own political reality? I'm just here to tell you what the political reality is. But and this is something that I want you to be aware of, though, Black Knight Fool. And then I'm gonna let this broadcast go because I done did my work. I done put in my hour. This is what people don't know about capitalism. The first capitalists were slavers. Capitalism got its start with slavery. What you think these motherfuckers came here to do? To capitalize off the labor of slaves. They had sugar, tobacco, and fucking cotton. That's all this shit was about. Sugar, tobacco, cotton, and fucking what? What else? So you mean motherfuckers, millions of motherfuckers died for some sugar? So a motherfucker can put some sugar in their shit and get diabetes? So motherfuckers can wear some nice clothes, right? That's what all this shit is about. So motherfuckers can smoke some shit and get cancer in their lungs. That's all this shit was about, huh? Some sugar, tobacco, and some cotton. These motherfuckers came with the prospects of making 4,000 times their profit. This was bigger than the biggest dope game ever. You can't make that much money selling drugs, bro. They came like moths to flames to this shit. Some people in Europe was like, okay, we're going to stay here. We don't feel like, it's too much of a risk for me. But you had some people that went out there like, we going to get it. We about to go get it. And they were merciless and they were ruthless and they didn't give a fuck about feelings. They went and got theirs. So I left the link. I'm going to leave it one more time. If anybody's got something to say in refutation to what I've just said, that's fine. I encourage you to state your case. Make your appeal. Come with your rebuttal. Or if you're in agreement, come also. All I'm trying to do is impart some wisdom and to let you know what these people are thinking. And that oftentimes we get distracted. We don't know whether we're going right or left. We don't know what to do. We don't feel like we know what strategy we ought to be using. But in the end, we ought to know what the origin of the problems are. And yes, it's complex, but it's not that complex. We make it more complex than it needs to be. I got a taker here.
What's going on?
Supreme Mexican, what's good, brother?
Got a taker here.
So what do you think what do you think our end goal should be?
Yeah, cut off the from YouTube. Cut your YouTube.
I'll cut it off. What do you think? What do you think the end goal should be in terms of like, black males in general? I mean, I feel like what's happening is like subtle genocide, right, or a silent genocide, which I mean is natural, right? A natural thing that's bound to happen with what how they view us, right? And so, what is the next step, really? Do you think?
The first thing is consciousness raising and becoming aware of what the problem is. And I think a lot of times in the manosphere, we get caught up too much on what women doing, but right. What women are doing is just a symptom of what these motherfuckers at the top of the food chain are doing. I mean, It is what it is. So I had a show a couple of days ago with a frat brother of mine named Sandog. I mean, and ultimately, like there was some hints about what could be done, but like I said, I don't have all the answers myself. But what I know, you got to resist against it with force,
right?
And you got to be slick though. It's gonna take men uniting and demanding that they do more than engage in consumer dandyism. Because that's right now, we're taught that life is a game, money is how you keep score. All you got to do is go get an education, go work for the white man, and then you're going to have a good life.
Right.
But they're doing more than that. They're doing way more than that. That's not what the good life consists. I mean, for a vast majority of them, that's what the good life consists in. But they're doing more than that.
Yeah, I think like Neely Fuller says, like he says that like, black people are very concerned with just showing off, like collecting trinkets and showing off. And there's not really any basic level of thought happening. And I don't want to talk about women, but a lot of the time when I deal with black women, because that's my preference, obviously, as a black male, and you try to have these discussions with them, there's some kind of, I'm under 30, I'm 26.
Okay.
So I deal with a lot of black women, and I can't really speak for older black women, but with a lot of the younger ones, there seems to be some kind of subtle programming that when you start speaking about white supremacy and you break it down from a technical perspective or a philosophical perspective, or even just on a basic level, there's some type of trigger. There's some kind of I don't want to call it. I mean, for lack of a better phrase, programming that it just triggers hostility. You know what I mean? Or even the ones that do talk about, behaving in a manner that is becoming of being a black person in the system of white supremacy. They're not actually acting in that manner. It's hard to break down to you, but it's just like people are not like because we complain, right? We have these endless conversations about white supremacy, police brutality. I mean, we talk about everything. We talk about segregation. We talk about this. We talk about that. Minority. At what point do people decide, okay, enough is enough? At what point do people decide to stop having this circular dance? You know what I mean? At what point do people get serious about this and stop looking at it from the perspective of it's just an inconvenience until it affects me? Well,
look, one thing I could be sure about is that you got to think like you want to control the environment. And black women are comfortable in the environment, man. I mean,
right.
The world has opened up for them, and now, they're consumer dandies. And I mean, I just hate to say this, but like, I know I've taught at the collegiate level. And so most people at the collegiate level, they're not there to get an education because education is intrinsically valuable. They're there to gain an education so they can get a job, so they can work for somebody. And education trains you how to endure boredom. That's what do you think these kids sitting in these rank and files in these classrooms are doing? I mean, now that, education has changed owing to what's happening during COVID, but I mean, like for the most part, when these kids were in actual physical classes, they were taught how to sit still and do what they're told.
Right.
They weren't taught how to deal with the environment, to play with it, to figure out how to impose their will on it. They're taught to sit and endure boredom and take this training and follow these rules. And who's teaching? And primarily, who's teaching them?
Right. Women. And I think on a basic level, like, we're just not concerned with self-preservation at all, because it just doesn't make sense to complain about racism, white supremacy, and then send your children to public school. I mean, that on a basic level, that just doesn't. It just seems so absurd, Well,
that's because we have to send them there. But that's a good question. And you know what? I think I know the answer. The answer is, I mean, to be quite honest, I've heard this from black women before myself, but I've heard it from black men as well. You know what I'm saying? It's not like it's just something unique to black women. The whole point is, when you start talking about white supremacy, the first thing some people will resort to is, well, what about the black on black crime? We are our own enemy. Like, these niggas, they need to improve themselves. They the ones that need. That's how you know right there, them motherfuckers don't want shit but what's good for themselves. They happy on the plantation. They good with that. Because huh?
Mm-hmm. Well, my thing is, like, as a man, like, how could you consider yourself a man and say something like that, especially when you've built nothing, you've built no institutions for people to inherit or to compete with? We're the only group that doesn't do that for the most part. But somebody will turn around and say, but what about, these young black males or these young black females, and they ain't about nothing and they ain't doing nothing, but you haven't created anything for them to do or be a part of. You know what I mean?
Well, at the end of the day, though, brother, and I had another guest that wanted to get in. Nick, I want you to come back. Please try to hit the link again. But having said that, man, black people, man, have been miseducated. I remember a quote from Carter G. Woodson, man, and the quote went like this, or something to this effect. I don't know the exact quote, but the idea was, teach a man that he has to go through the back door. Even when he has the opportunity to go through the front door, he's still going to go to the back door. And if the back door doesn't exist anymore, he's going to make a back door, because he's been trained to go into the back door. So the reality is, black people have not been taught what they should be aiming and striving for. We've been taught that we need to be obedient and engage in obeisance and obsequiousness. It just is what it is. So I got another person need to come on, my brother. Thank you for joining.
Appreciate your time. Thank you.
All right, now. My brother Nick, what's going on, man? Talk to me, bro. Hold on.
Girl, calling from Jamaica.
What's up, my brother Jamaican?
Yeah. So basically, what we have found in the Caribbean as black guys, we found that Christianity has been a major detriment to the development of black people in the Western Hemisphere. Christianity has taught us to be obedient, never to disobey those who are put above us. So basically, we can't really even fight for what we really should be getting, because indoctrination is at the school and also at the religious level and in the home. And in Jamaica, it's a matriarchal society where basically women call the shots. So that's, as you said in your opening session, that the black woman is not on your side, on our side. They're basically there to keep us in check as the underclass of men. The slaves to work on this plantation, so to speak, until we die.
Well, I mean, to some degree that's true. But at the end of the day, what black men need to do is, if that's the case, then you need to forego those relationships until you can get the shit together to where you can turn the tide in your favor. Like the guy I was talking to, my fat brother Sandog, it's discipline. Like if your life consists in the epicure pursuit, the pursuit of the orgasm, then you're not gonna have time to do whatever the fuck else you need to do.
That's true.
So, like, why do you have to defer to a woman to get shit done? Like, nobody needs their permission to start fucking actualizing a program or a plan. I don't need to talk to a woman and say, do I have your permission, ma'am, to actually engage on terraforming the environment and actually engaging in having an unrestricted imposition of my will on that environment? The last time I checked, we don't need their permission to do that. But I get what you're saying, though. If you're going to operate within the context of the confines of the system, then of course you're going to get checked.
Yeah.
Because they're there within the system. But see, this is the funny thing. This is the funny thing about the Matrix to me. Let me tell you how funny this is to me. Okay, so the Matrix is supposed to be like this is like the red pill philosophy, right?
Yeah.
So the whole idea is for people to take the red pill, so they can get out of the blue pill, which is get out of the appearance, get to the reality, and then when you get to the reality, you're supposed to be able to find a means by which to resist against the machines. That's the whole purpose, right? I mean, there's no reason to take the red pill and to be understanding of what's going on, and then to just, okay, well, now I know what's going on. Well, cool. We got some knowledge about it now. That's not the whole goal. The goal is then to take the knowledge, but that's just the first step. Becoming aware is the first step. Remember, in this movie, Neo had to have Morpheus train him, upload information into his data bank, whatever, his processing unit, if you want to call it that, so that he could have understanding of how to actually fight against the Matrix. I mean, he had to learn how to fight.
Yeah, I agree with you.
So we have to learn how to fight, bro.
Yeah. One of the things that I've realized here in Jamaica, that even in Jamaica, black people and black people don't see eye to eye based on where they come from. And this is basically based on the interaction with other ethnic groups within the island. You have some black people who associate with the Chinese and they do well at business. Some other black people associate with whites and they do well at this and do well at that. So one of the things that we as the Western black people have to do, we have to basically use the same tricks that they use on us, use back on them to gain power. And one of the things, especially here in Jamaica, what happens to most black people is that they don't know that the upper class, which is a mixture of white, Chinese, and Semitic people, they use us as underclass to continue to consume and buy, but do not try to engage or entrepreneurial skill sets. So it's all about just consumption.
Yeah, I mean that's I mean, for the most part, that's what everybody's been taught: consume, 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 buy a whole bunch of stuff you don't need, and that's somehow going to lead you to feel good about yourself, and that's indicative of what the good life is. But these kind of images are basically pushed to us through the media incessantly. It's pushed through music, it's pushed through movies, television shows, cable network shows, whatever the case may be. We're taught buy this, buy, even on YouTube, buy this, buy that. You can buy that, buy this, and buy that.
Yeah,
man, look, you can't buy your way to happiness, man. I mean, you need money in order to be able to fulfill certain functions, but you're not gonna be able to buy your way to happiness. These people are imposing their will. They're using finance. They're using war. They're using diplomacy. They're using anything that they can, all kinds of strategies, in order to come to the point where they can have some sort of power and exert some sort of control over their environments. Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, so that's why I said, man, SYSBM is the only way for us black men to get out of this matrix of this Western world. I mean, there's when you have the ability to travel and see things from a different perspective and learn new cultures, you'll be better able to basically survive. So I say SYSBM straight for me.
But the funny thing about it is, there was a guy in the Matrix who came to the realization that for him, and he went and had some dinner at a diner with or some restaurant with one of the agents, and he was like, "Put me back in. I don't want to remember a thing. Put me back into the Matrix. I want to be somebody important, an actor or something." I mean, the idea is that some people are happy with this system. They want to exist within it. But even if you exist within it, don't exist as a pawn within it. Even if you must exist within it, why do you have to exist as a pawn within it? I just don't understand it. But, that's just my thinking. But anyway, brother, thank you so much for joining the stream. All
Thank
right.
you, man.
Thank you, bro.
Appreciate it.
All right. So look, I had Ed. He was trying to get in here. Somebody gave me another token. Thank you, Skip Michaels. Appreciate it, brother, for the token. Thank you, Man Friday, in the UK there. Thank you for the token. And Aaron Smith, thank you so much, sir, for the token. And yeah, that's all I got right now. I can't see any further up on my thread. So, I mean, you know, the idea is like what I can't do is carve out a strategy for 40 million Negroes. I can't do that. I could come up with what I consider to be a plan, but it would have to be something the Black people would have to agree with in order to implement. But that's an awesome burden and a responsibility. You can't fuck your way out of this. You can't consumer dandy your way out of this. I mean, but the formula is tried and true. You got to get brutal in this motherfucker. I mean, there's no other way. Ed, you've been invited on the stream. What's good? Ed.
Yeah, I'm here. What's up?
What's up, bro?
Nothing much. I made sure I went back in the video so I had an understanding of the context of what you were talking about. So I didn't come up here sounding fucking stupid or anything.
Yeah, I mean, so the context of the show is, man, look, what is the root of the problem? A lot of times we consider the root of the problem to be women. Or it could be Black women, white women. It could be, other Black people. It could be a whole host of things that we come up with while we're perturbed or upset about something or the other. But at the end of the day, our predicament is primarily, substantially, and I would say overwhelmingly, owing to in-group males. That's just the way the system is arranged. They run the shit. They make the laws. They govern this motherfucker. And everybody can talk about, we got a buffer class. Fuck that. Fuck a buffer class. They are a buffer class. They're irritating as shit. But you can sidestep them. So what do we deal with?
Well,
how do we deal with the problem at hand?
Well, that's where I disagree with and why I wanted to come up. Like, the reality is, part of the art of war is to win battles before they're ever fought. And the reason why it's a difference between understanding where the root of the problem is and understanding where you have to start. And you can't skip steps. The reality of the situation is, if Black people are not on a somewhat united front or critical mass front, nothing's going to work, period. There is no, because even if you get smaller percentages of Black people, let's say 10% or 15% to be in the same page, the reality is, even taking the women off the table, those folks are going to get bought off. That's where the talented 10th and the bourgeoisie comes in all the time, because people assume that those people are bought off, which a lot of them in many ways are. It may be varying degrees to that, but a lot of them are. They may do something here or there, but they're never going to do something that can potentially push the system over critical mass. So even if you get like 15, I'd say upwards of 20% is generally on the same page, they're either going to buy those folks off, or if they come at it via the ultra pro black nationalist standpoint, that's enough of Black people for it to use propaganda to basically affect the greater population of Black people enough to where the greater population will turn on those dudes, i.e. things like the Nation of Islam. When Malcolm X, people act like Malcolm X was the most popular dude in the world when he was alive. No, he was not. A lot of Black people try to remix history and act like they were all for him when they really were not. So there's a lot of different ways you can go at that before you even engage. Even if we take the easy detonator off the table, which is your own women. Because here's the reality of the situation. You start going after that white man directly, the reality is, in many ways, your women are going to be one of the first ones to get into them. Because like BGS said, Black men are programmed to be white and Black women are programmed to be white. And the reality is, too, and this is where everybody comes into play. whether it's non-ADOS folks, whether it's a lot of wealthy folks, whether it's folks that are on the the black on black crime. I call them pro-whites, because there's a difference between, you can be a black conservative and not be pro-white. But the pro-white folks, the quote unquote hood conservatives, you have a lot of folks, even if you take the females completely off the table, that are going to be invested in the system as is. I mean, when you hear a lot of black people talk about Donald Trump, there's a lot of black men that talk about Donald Trump with like the twinkle in their eye. There's a difference between,
you're not offering any solutions. You're not talking about tackling the problem. You just said it's impossible to tackle the problem.
No, what I'm doing is, because what I'm doing, well, you have to understand the scope of the problem first.
But I do understand the scope of the problem. Look, what I'm telling you is, in no uncertain terms, what is the root of the problem? Now, we can talk about strategies on how to chip away at the problem. We can start with any number of solutions, right? And I believe in looking at see, this is what generals do. They sit back and they look at the entire theater of the planet, and they figure out ways in which they can utilize the environment. They can utilize propaganda. They can utilize a whole host of strategies in order to try to turn the tide in a conflict so that it shifts in their favor. Now, the question is, okay, usually what happens, like, even if you like a fucking federal agent and you're trying to take down, let's say, for a criminal enterprise, you mark all the players down on a board. You find out what their proclivities and their habits are, how they think. And then you begin to chip away at the people on the lower end of the board. And you work maybe even with the enemies of, your enemy. So because the friend of my, or the foe of my foe is my friend, you know what I'm saying, in certain situations. So the whole point is, how do we do it? Not what the problems are. What do we start doing?
Where you start is, you have to get a critical mass of black men that are on the same page and are moving almost like a cult-like unit. So that is where it starts. And it can't be just a couple of people here and there. It's got to be like 15%, 15%. That's where it starts. Because without that, everything you said is predicated on what I just said already being in place.
Well,
that's where it starts. So you have to build up that critical mass.
Well, I would say this: you already got, you got the Nation of Islam, you got a whole bunch of Hotep motherfuckers, you got a whole bunch of people in the manosphere. Ain't nothing stopping us but us.
Even people in the manosphere are not on the same page with that, and even the Nation of Islam is currently being infiltrated by Scientology. So a lot of those folks sound good, but to do what you talking about, go ahead.
There will never be 100% consensus, even in the formation of America. There was no consensus. There's never going to be consensus.
Well, I'm not saying 100%. I said like 15%.
Even within the 15%, no group of people who turn the critical mass are going to be in consensus. There's no way to reach consensus. I'm not even in consensus. Let me put it this way. You ever sat on the toilet and tried to take a shit and you couldn't shit?
Well, I'm just talking about consensus that the white supremacy is the root of the problem.
Ed, have you ever sat on the toilet and tried to take a shit and you couldn't?
No, I'm not aware of that. No.
So you never got constipated in your fucking life. Come on, Ed. So my whole point is, if you can't trust what your own ass is supposed to do, how you gonna be in consensus and you don't even know what your own stuff?
I mean,
how you gonna know what somebody else gonna do or what they?
I mean, that sounds good, but other groups are in consensus. That all the groups that I mentioned are in consensus to much more in consensus that where black men that are arguing from your perspective are in. That's the issue. So you don't have to, you're right, you don't have to have 100% consensus, but you do have to be on the same page more than the next group. Because that's where you start. And then everything that I said before, that's the only way to attack that. Because if
you went out
kind of with serious resistance.
Well, we got to remake the brains. Like the young cat Rakim said a long time ago. Remember, you're not a slave, because we was put here to be much more than that, but we couldn't see because our mind was trapped. I came to take away the chain. The pain, take away the chains, remake the brains, reveal my name. Something's got to happen at some point, or we could be stuck on stupid arguing about women all fucking day. That's why I'm just tired of that shit.
Well, I mean, the thing about it though is here's what was how dudes that quote unquote argue about women interpret what you just said is they basically say, you know, fuck what you talking about, get on my hotel plan. And then dudes are going to instantly short circuit on that to the point where, honestly, if you want to hear the honest truth about a lot of them dudes will, if you really get them to say honesty and cut all the bullshit, they'll say, you know what, they think the community is already dead. So anything you're saying is like dead on arrival. And a lot of those guys are a lot of the productive guys that not necessarily you need for the masculinity juice, but you definitely need for the resource juice. Because a lot of the dudes on the quote unquote masculinity side, the hood side, for the most part, are already compromised because they're talking about being products of their environment. So they're already compartmentalized in where they need to, where they can't pop out except one or a few of them. And so what happens is it becomes a circular bullshit. That's the reality of the situation. So people can say, well, you got to believe in your manhood. You got to, and dudes ain't hearing that because they see that as propaganda. They see that as basically you carrying water for females. That's how they're always going to. And it's the same thing when you talk to a Republican, a black conservative. With this on the black on black crime. I mean, I'm not trying to be like the shit is hopeless. What I'm telling you is the biggest issue is the consensus issue. And the shame no longer works in the black community anymore. A lot of black men are really like, fuck it. Like that's really where they are.
I feel you, Ed, but I got another caller coming in. Thank you so much for the contribution.
Yeah, absolutely.
I got to get this nameless protagonist on here, man, to put his 2 cents in. Hey, nameless, man, what's good with you, brother? How you doing, man? Welcome to the show, man. I gotta, we gotta keep it moving. What's going on, my brother? Because I got people chiming in. What's up, my brother, nameless? How are you, sir?
Can you hear me, family?
Yeah, I got you.
Okay, so a lot of what I was gonna say has kind of already been said. I'll just bring the mention of number one. When we're talking about solutions, I can say one of the biggest things the sphere has produced is the verbiage that allows us to identify the modality that white supremacy has been aggressively infiltrating the black community, men and women, which is the gynocratic conditioning, period. We've been able to get so much done by being able to identify that conditioning and what's posturing it to actually work and function. And it's giving us an opportunity to begin counter programming, which is going to create a shift in values. And if you don't have a shift in values, you're not going to have enough people to aggregate behind a goal, to mobilize behind what you're talking about. I did a video where I described the great web of manipulation, which literally spelled out step by step how the CIA, how the FBI, how COINTELPRO works, how even propaganda works to influence messages and push forward an agenda. You are absolutely right. The root of the issue is white supremacy. And Dr. Francis Cress Welsing spelled out what the objective is. Social dominance theory gives us a language to begin to decode how it works and why and how it's going to affect you so that we can recognize this terminology of subordinate male so that we can understand why we're running into these damn problems. Because once again, black people have a dual consciousness, one for being American, one for being black. And if we don't understand how us being black and being in this subordinate male positioning is, again, a snapshot of the battlefield and not some indictment to giving up, we won't be able to begin to take these steps to counter program. And, I just want to appreciate or say thank you for coming up here and really kind of highlighting this, because we don't have these languages of really speaking about power, and showing the value of things that Dr. Claude Anderson talks about with powernomics. But again, ultimately, at the end of the day, what I'm saying is the gynocracy is the last point of contact that white supremacy is operated through. And if we don't recognize it as a system of control and leverage that's being used to essentially rob us of our ability to move forward, we're not going to understand that we're in a chokehold, and we need to start making moves against that.
Yeah, so, look, this is how I look at it, man. This is just, look, these people have a different kind of axiology. Do you get what I'm saying?
Yeah.
So in their mind, they're like, I'm going to rule wherever I can. You got a lot of black men talking about, I want some pussy. You got a lot of black men like, I want to be, I want to have this nice car and some shit like that. And the most wealthy and the powerful men don't give a fuck about that shit for real. Now, you got some men who are dandies, white men who are dandies. But then you got some rough and tumble white motherfuckers who know what the real game is and how to get to it. And they will stop at nothing, in order to maintain their power or to gain or to, acquire more power. That's what they want. Now, the question is, I don't have solutions. I'm just describing the facts. I'm coming with political realism. Now, I'm not right now. I want to try to, bond with men who have similar ideals and who want to see other men come to fruition that look like us. You know what I'm saying? But
right.
At some point, like talking about the problems and talking about like, well, why we can't do it and like how hard it'll be and like it hasn't worked before. I mean, it just sounds like a slave saying, I ain't going nowhere. This shit might take hundreds of years to flip.
But there you just said it right there. This is a generational situation we're here, and we very likely may not see the benefits of it in our lifetime. And that comes from, again, addressing values and addressing the culture and deprogramming this.
And then and another thing is important to understand, like, and this is something that I know by studying philosophy in general, right? And so most of our thinking about the world is predicated upon modern philosophy. I mean, I'm talking about John Locke, Thomas Hobbes, Jean-Jacques Rousseau, Adam Smith, a whole host of philosophers who have portrayed the world as a world in which you got individuals making individual decisions and creating life plans predicated upon what's best for them and what's in their own best interest. Now, people throughout the entirety of the world, they don't think like that. The Chinese don't think like that. The Japanese don't think like that. Jews don't think like that. Even people in African nations, a lot of them don't think like that. This is some weird shit. This is a Western, industrial, educated, rich, democratic nation that pushes this kind of value system. And the value system, I can go into philosophers who critique it. I'm talking about even white people who critique it, right? And they say that it creates anomie. It creates psychic dis-ease. Even within the context of their own culture, they're like, we need to pull back. We need to reclaim, the thinking of the ancients, because where this is leading us is leading us into a false reality, right? But I mean, but what I do know, we can talk about philosophy, we can talk about political, social, and moral philosophy. We can even talk about, metaphysics. But at the end of the day, these people are about power, and we're identifying the ways in which power is being exacted on us. And it's up to us to either live the life of a hedonist, which many brothers that's what they're going to do. I mean, the red pill requires a fucking resistance. I mean, once you take the pill, the work is to be done after the pill is taken.
It's an initiation and rite of passage. And if we go back to culture, culture almost overwhelmingly has a place that brings men into the status of going from adolescence to manhood. And unfortunately, the plantation gave us a dynamic where all we really were just simply children who grew up. And when I say grew up, I mean it just in the literal sense, where we are grown children, not men and women. And it was because there was never an interest for us to operate under the capacity and the authority of adults. And unfortunately, we take so many of our cultural cues from things that didn't require rites of passage. And the only things that we do get are approximations of adulthood, such as being involved in a gang, getting sent to prison, or going into the military. These are all approximations that approximate a rites of passage, but they're missing all the elements you need to truly run a society. And it's done essentially, part of it is just the end result of being in a postmodern industrial society overall, which wants to compartmentalize aspects of being human and try to commoditize them. But the other half was our culture, which was completely reset on the plantation, never had a component for us to act in that capacity anyway. I mean, it was never even our intention for even to be over here after slavery ended. Nobody wanted us here. It was only the fact that it was a logistical nightmare that they couldn't handle that we're still here. And we had to make these adjustments. And unironically, the time period in this country where we had the greatest level of success was when we literally had nowhere else to go. And the environment forced us to be on that, what's known in the art of war as deadly ground.
Precisely. And you know what? To be quite frank, Negroes are happy, man. We're like pigs rolling around in the mud here, bro. Because we live in a major industrialized society. Any Negro, I mean, even the poorest of Negroes have microwaves, refrigerators, and can go get their kids some Air Jordans. I mean, I just hate to say this shit, but it's the truth. But the question is whether or not people will continue to be satisfied, especially thinking people. It's one thing for people who are not in the know to behave and to think that way. But once you acquire understanding and knowledge of what the system is and how it operates, to just sit back and to do nothing and to be happy with the status quo, well, then, I mean, what is it to stopping? Some sort of, at least the formative stages of developing some resistance to it. And it doesn't have to come in the form of overt violence. That's not even necessary. You don't have to use that strategy because like Edward said, the art of war is not having to fight at all. It's being able to manipulate the opponent. But we're not even engaged in trying to manipulate the opponent. Have a fucking read, bro. Like right now, we're playing a game of chess, but we're playing the game like checkers. And until we start to play the game like chess, and until we start understanding that, look, it's more than about my personal life and my personal satisfaction and my personal achievement. This is an effort that it's like a tree growing, right? And there are parts of the tree that die off and atrophy, but the tree keeps growing. You see what I'm saying?
I do.
The organism keeps stretching forward, and like leaves fall off, but as those fall off, others grow, and then the tree gets sustenance to keep branching out.
It's a cycle.
But right now, the saddest part of Western education is this religious individualism, right? And so, like I said, you can live the life of a hedonist, or an epicure, but that's no better than the life of a pig. You can live the life of the ethical person and just merely subscribe to the ethics of the culture that you have, or you could be that kind of person who takes a leap of faith, who creates a whole different scenario of the world, and who organizes people, maybe not even visibly organizes them, but in a shadow kind of way, because you don't have to move overtly to do this.
Ivan von Clausewitz identifies the objective of war is not to necessarily kill your opponent, but to render them disarmed. And it's the fact that we don't understand that not all hostile action has to be violent, or all violent action doesn't have to be physical. You understand what I'm saying?
Precisely. That's why, like, take for example, Colin Kaepernick kneeling at an NFL game.
Right.
To the people who were all caught up in that gesture, that was an act of violence.
Exactly.
That was violence to them because it went at the heart of their ethos. And it was, because think about it. An American football game in the NFL, that's a ritual. Bottom line, it's a ritual. And so to break or to kind of thumb one's nose at any part of that ritual, that nationalistic, jingoistic ritual, that was an act of violence. And those people didn't take kindly to that. Okay? So, but you don't even have to be overtly violent. Man, bad boys move in silence, man. We can talk about strategy, but I think, we need to talk about that shit in private. So I'm not gonna sit here and go through all of that, but just know that we got to start thinking, man, and then we got to plan for the long game. You can't. It took the Germans 800 years to finally sack Rome, man.
They were getting clowned on the entire time by Rome, and people don't understand that. And that shadow haunted them all the way up until even when You had Friedrich Nietzsche's era. And ultimately, I guess people broke down and took that the way they wanted to. Certain people in the what would eventually become the Nazi Party took certain things he said out of context and created what they did. But it was enough of an insight to realize that what they were doing wasn't enough to change them and turn them into their own nation. And I think that at the end of the day, we have to begin to really become those warrior scholars that were talked about back during when we got our pro-Black training a while ago. You know, and I'm not saying that we need to be animated by the same nonsense, because we already understand the role the gynocracy played to sabotage that. But there's more than one way to win. And it begins by making plans. It's the general that makes the most plans will win, especially if you're able to understand the condition of yourself and understand the condition of your opponent. And don't make no mistakes. Just like the minister said, we were at war the second them boats came over to the continent. Period.
Yes, sir. I mean, it's war for self-respect, because what men have traditionally done throughout the annals of time is gain a hold on their environment. And right now we are uniquely posed. And look, what these people know this shit. They studied us more than we've studied ourselves. They know every eventuality, any plan, anything that could happen, they are ready to subvert it. Okay? Now, the question is, do they really know everything? I mean, can they stop what's eventually going to come to pass? Can they? Because man, human beings are resilient as hell, man. Mm-hmm. People don't just die off. I mean, you got to kill them off. And even when you try to kill them off, they still survive and find a way. You know, human beings are like roaches, man. So at the end of the day, how do you find a way to maintain integrity and to exert some control over your environment such that you're not just passively being acted upon, but you become an active agent in the global stage?
You begin by controlling yourself.
Precisely. I think that's, and then being able to have some control over the youth. One of the worst things that ever happened to us as Black people was we started matriculating into these integrated schools, and we subjected ourselves to their education process. That was the dumbest shit we ever did, but we did it because we were prideful and we wanted to be respected. And I understand it. It might have been a necessary step in the stage, but it was a bad step in the stage as far as I'm concerned. Because now you got a whole bunch of white women teaching our Black kids, and they're fucking their minds up, man.
It came from us not having that culture. And at the end of the day, I really appreciate what Dr. Tia Johnson is doing with the Black male agenda, because it's an encompassing idea that talks and speaks directly to what you just said. And it allows us to have some type of strategy that we can devise tactics that are appropriate to our own unique scenarios and be able to maybe start reversing this, because I still believe it's reversible, because the common denominator element in all of this is human nature at the end of the day. It's just we need to recognize the hostile condition that we're on. And we've always been on deadly ground here. But what's the one rule whenever you're placed on deadly ground that's always stated? And that's to never surround an opponent that's on deadly ground, because they will fight you with everything they have. You create an image of being able to escape, and one by one, you slaughter each and every one of them, because they'll be so focused on trying to get out, they'll fail to realize the situation that they're actually in.
Yeah. Well, thank you, Mr. Protagonist. I'm about to, it's almost two hours in. I didn't even expect to be doing this long, but thank you so much for coming in. I'm glad you were able to put your input into the show. Thank you, Edward. Thank you. I forgot the two other people. I think one guy's name was Nick, and then I had another gentleman join in. But look, thank you for joining the show. And you know, we're not going to come up with all the answers right now, but the whole point is to start thinking about it and to start thinking strategically about it. We know who the principal players are. I'm just saying we need to know what the root of the problem is. I'm not saying that we have to chip away at the root right now. I'm just saying you got to at least know what the fucking problem is and what the master thinks. What does he think? What kind of ethos fills his spirit? What kind of thoughts does he process related to his ideal of his right to impose his will on the environment and other people? They're unequivocal. They're unwavering. Now, of course, there's like different opinions amongst these people, but one thing I know for sure, they don't have a fear of being in control. Having said all that, y'all be easy, man. Have a good night. Peace.
I know you player haters gon' hate, cause I'm at the finish line and I'm in the first place. I'm a winner, and I know I'll never lose, cause I'm way too ahead of you, dude. I know you player haters gon' hate, cause I'm at the finish line and I'm in the